BYD, China's largest producer of electric vehicles, is looking to make its way into the off-roader market with their new brand, Fangchengbao Bao, and their first model, the Bao 5.
Welcome to Wheels Boy, where we cover the newest, coolest, and wildest vehicles from the Chinese car market. Be sure to like, subscribe, and hit the bell.
Do you want to own an off-roader with a refrigerator and a hydraulic suspension? We can help. In fact, we can help you to purchase pretty much any Chinese car and export it to your country, provided you're not in the United States or Canada due to import regulations. Anyways, if you're interested in us connecting you with a reliable exporter of Chinese vehicles, reach out to us via email at sales@wheelsboy.cn. First, we must address what the heck a Fangchengbao Bao is. So Fangcheng in Chinese is formula or equation, and Bao means leopard or panther. So that's why you've probably seen some foreign media translate it as formula leopard. That's not an inaccurate translation, but according to the people that I've spoken with at BYD, it's probably not the name, or almost certainly not the name, they're going to use when they take this brand abroad. I don't know if that's actually the case. Who knows? I've been led astray previously in these kinds of things. But what you do need to know is that for the purposes of this video, I'm going to refer to it as Fangchengbao Bao, or FCB. Now that we know what Fangchengbao Bao means, let's talk about what a Fangchengbao Bao looks like. The answer is simple and unavoidable: a Ford Bronco Sport. And I do mean from pretty much every conceivable angle. The front, the profile, the rear, all of it. It is significantly larger than a Ford Bronco Sport, however. That vehicle's 4.4 meters in length, this one is 4.9 meters in length. I also want to say that I really like the lighting signature they developed for the front end here. I just wish they'd put that much effort into the rest of the car. The Bao 5 does have some interesting sculpting here on the side. Here, behind the front wheel well, and back here, in front of the rear wheel well. It's unique, and it gives it a very strong profile, but it also has the effect of making it look like it was in an accident fresh from the factory. Opening the barn-style rear door of the Bao 5, we see a very square, very capacious rear cargo space. 475 liters with the seats up, 1,069 when you fold them down. There also is a tiny bit of storage underneath this area here. Soft close is available on the rear door for the mid and top spec, but not the entry-level cars. From this angle, however, you can see something much more interesting. Underneath the Bao 5 logo, 4.8S. That refers to the 0 to 100 km/h time, and that means it's time to talk about DMO. DMO is the latest addition to the DM, or dual mode hybrid powertrain family from BYD. There's also DMI, dual mode intelligent, that's the fuel efficient version, and DMP, dual mode performance, the performance version, obviously. DMO stands for dual mode off-road, but it differs from DMI and DMP. And not just because it's the only one that doesn't have a hyphen between DM and the other letter. For starters, the front-mounted 4-cylinder engine is longitudinally mounted and not transverse as it is in DMI and DMP. It's also turbocharged, not naturally aspirated. It is still, however, a traditional plug-in hybrid and not an extended range EV. Extended range EVs like the Yangwang U8, the engine only acts as a generator for the batteries and the motors. It doesn't actually produce power that goes directly to the wheels. That's not the case with this car. Being a plug-in hybrid, it does have a battery and a pure electric range. That battery is 32 kilowatt hours and the pure electric range is 125 kilometers on China's domestic CLTC cycle and 100 kilometers on the WLTC cycle. The Bao 5 is in many ways a mini Yangwang U8, particularly in the fact that it can also be had with the D-Sys-P adjustable hydraulic suspension system. Now, that's only available on the tippity-top spec car out of the 3 specs. Ours, unfortunately, isn't that spec. It's a mid-spec vehicle, so we won't be able to show it to you today. There are various option packages that you can choose for this vehicle, starting with wheels. This one is equipped with the standard 18-inch wheels, but there is a 20-inch wheel package that costs $1,400 US. That also includes a full-size rear-mounted spare wheel and upgraded front brakes. Those brakes are 6-piston calipers and vented discs. You can also choose between all-terrain and street tires. This one's obviously got the all-terrain KO2s on it, BF Goodrich KO2s. And you can choose a beadlock wheel style, but they haven't announced the price for that one. I am in heaven here on the inside of the Bao 5, not because of the standard 15.6-inch center screen or the available 12.3-inch passenger screen, but because of the sheer number of physical buttons. The door buttons, oh, they're physical. The buttons for the steering wheel, physical. Oh, the buttons for adjusting all of your off-road settings, physical. And even a beautiful set of crystalline toggles here behind the shift knob. The interior of the Bao 5 does resemble a bit of a mini U8, not necessarily in the styling language, which is very different. The Bao 5 feels definitely a little bit more simpler, a little bit less luxurious, though material qualities are pretty decent. This mid-spec car has standard real leather seats, and it also has heating, cooling, and massaging functions. That's obviously also available on the top spec car, though entry-level only has heating and cooling. What I mean by the fact that it resembles the U8 is in a few of the particular functions. For example, it also has these buttons here on the steering wheel for adjusting your driving mode, your on-road driving modes, and your off-road driving modes here on the right, though these wheels are considerably smaller than the U8. I guess when you spend that much money, you get bigger wheels. It also has the same console storage for refrigerated console storage, rather, refrigerated and heated, though it has a significant upgrade over the U8 in my opinion. Instead of having to use the center screen to control the temperature in this thing, you have this super convenient little knob with a digital display. It can go from -6 to 6 degrees Celsius. That's around 21 to 43 degrees Fahrenheit. Here on the center console, you have a single wireless charging pad, 50 watts, so quick charge. After that, you obviously have your transmission lever and then the physical buttons that I mentioned previously. On the left side of the transmission lever, you have your front and rear locking differential. And then down below, you've got these nice crystalline knobs. Now, your taste may differ from mine. I personally am not a huge fan of this kind of crystal stuff. I think it just kind of ends up looking cheap, but I am a fan of the fact that they are very, very prominently displayed and they're also very easy to use. Well, what do they control? On the left side here, you have your hazard lights. Then you have the button for switching between your pure EV and your hybrid electric vehicle powertrain modes. In the center here, you have an on-off button for the powertrain. Now, that's not necessarily necessary. The reason being that this, like so many modern electric vehicles, when you get into it with the keys, you can just put it into drive and set off. This, however, would come in handy if, for example, you were camping and you wanted to use the vehicle to load setting. That means allowing the vehicle to charge something external, say a grill or something like that while you were camping. On the other side here, you've got the different driving modes. Specifically, your different, this will open your menu for your various off-road modes. And then over here, finally, you have the for low setting. When you hit this drive mode button down here, it opens up the drive mode menu, which is probably the best looking part of the menu for this car. The rest of it it's fine, it's just not particularly attractive. Here you can see all sorts of information related to off-roading, like your pitch angle and your roll angle. You can also check the status of your wheels, the tire pressure, and you can see the suspension settings. It's also going to display your current maximum ground clearance. This vehicle doesn't have the DSP adjustable suspension, so it's currently at 220 millimeters or 22 centimeters. Then finally, you've got a compass, altitude, and it'll even tell you today when the sunrise and the sunset will be. While the Yangwang U8 uses a Dynaudio sound system, this one uses DVLA, like a Denza. This thing has either 16 or 18 speakers. This being a mid-spec car, it's 18. The Bao 5 is a very elegant off-roader. How do I know? Because it has a fragrance system. Being a very square off-roader, the Bao 5 has very, very good headroom and pretty decent legroom as well. The wheelbase is 2.8 meters. The rear seats are heated as standard, but only the top spec model adds cooling as well. Apart from that, there's really not a whole lot going on back here. We've got a fold down center armrest with a cup holder, no screen or anything, and you've got 2 USB charging ports. Material quality inside of the Bao 5 is pretty decent. As I already mentioned, if you get mid-spec or higher, you get real leather seats, which obviously feel very, very soft, as do most of the other surfaces that you can touch within the car. Lower down, however, you do have some hard, ugly plastic areas, though there may be a reason for that. This is a hardcore off-roader after all, and this is the stuff that's probably more likely to get dirty and needs to be easier to clean. I'm now about to be taken through a series of man-made obstacles in order to illustrate the off-road capabilities of the Bao 5. So now seems as good a time as any to talk a little bit about the underbody of this thing, the chassis and some of its off-road features. I've got a handy list here in front of me because honestly, there's a lot to talk about. Starting with the fact that this thing has double wishbone front and rear suspension. Now, let's talk a little bit about the approach, departure angles, and breakover angles. Let's talk a little bit about the approach, departure, and breakover angles on this thing, as well as its maximum ground clearance. So, that's 35-degree approach angle, 32-degree departure angle, and a maximum breakover angle of 20 degrees. Maximum ground clearance, 220 millimeters, 22 centimeters. Of course, that's only if you don't get the top spec model, which has the D-Sys-P hydraulic suspension system. That's adjustable. It has a maximum approach angle of 39 degrees, maximum departure angle of 35 degrees, and then a maximum breakover angle of 27 degrees. Maximum ground clearance, 31 centimeters, 310 millimeters. For context, a Land Cruiser Prado has a maximum approach angle of 31 degrees, maximum departure angle of 22 degrees, and a breakover angle of 25 degrees. Its maximum ground clearance is 221 millimeters. So a little bit more on that ground clearance than the standard Fangchengbao Bao 5, but definitely doesn't have as good approach and departure angles. The DMO system also has a specially designed, apparently first ever, electronic 4-low. It's a special 4-low gear for that rear motor. It also has front and rear locking differentials. Now, this vehicle uses cell-to-chassis technology, so it has the battery mounted very low underneath the car. That could be an issue when you're off-roading. If you were worried about that, well, you could always get the optional 8mm thick underbody protection tray. That's $1,400 US. Time shift. It has been exactly 1 week since I experienced the Bao 5 in Shenzhen, and since then, I have left those warm climates to return to cold Shanghai, where I received a much-needed haircut. More importantly, we have borrowed a Bao 5 for a cheeky little test drive so I can actually tell you what it's like on the road. Let me start with something that won't come as a surprise to anyone who watched the first part of this video. This thing is ridiculously fast, particularly for an off-road SUV of this nature. 0 to 100 kilometers per hour in 4.8 seconds, and it feels like it. In fact, according to local media's real-world testing, it's actually closer to 4.6 seconds to 100 kilometers per hour. What happens when you deplete the battery below 20%? Well, it can still manage the 100 kilometer per hour sprint in 6 seconds flat. Compare that to the 6.8 seconds of this thing's closest rival, the Tank 400 PHEV that we drove last year. That thing's 0 to 100 kilometer per hour time of 6.8 seconds was already really fast for a car in this segment, but it feels like an absolute boat compared to the Bao 5. That number makes it even faster than something like a G500. In order to get a faster off-road SUV, I think you have to go for the G63. In fact, if I'm not mistaken, a 0 to 100 kilometer per hour time of 4.6 seconds makes it among the fastest off-road SUVs that you can buy. And that's not the only area where the Bao 5 separates itself from a majority of vehicles in this segment. It also has standard front and rear double wishbone suspension, which provides a level of refinement in its ride that you do not see in many of its competitors. It also has a level of body control that is pretty impressive for a large off-road oriented SUV like this one. What I mean is it doesn't roll over on its side anytime you throw it into a corner. Not to mention the steering feel. Well, I shouldn't say steering feel, I should just say the level of directness in the steering and the responsiveness of the steering. You don't get that in very many SUVs in this category. There's still a noticeable amount of slop in the steering wheel. As you can see, I can move it quite a bit without actually changing the direction of the vehicle, but compared to competitors like the Tank 400, it is downright precise. And this is a mid-spec car, just like the one that I was experiencing in Shenzhen, which means it doesn't have the D-P adjustable hydraulic suspension. The spec that has that is an extra around $6,000 more than this car. All I can say is that that thing better be pretty darn good in order to justify that extra money, because this mid-spec is already pretty impressive. The Bao 5 offers a pretty compelling package when it comes to performance, luxury, and off-road capability. The only problem is, well, that copycat styling. I have, however, seen some concept cars for future models, and they do offer something a bit more unique. So I will hold out hope that they can fix that, because other than the design, I think this thing's a home run.